Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we discuss matters of international, national, and local political importance in a calm, measured, and reasonable way to get to the heart of the matter. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury. Good evening and welcome. And I'll start off with just a gentle reminder. Please give us a like, a follow, a comment, a subscribe. If you're following us on YouTube, you will see the links shortly in the chat. You can watch us in either portrait or landscape, whichever floats your boat. Yes. So today we got a nice subject to tackle, and someone that knows what they're talking about with regard to it. Housing, one of the biggest issues facing Portsmouth right now. The city has thousands of people on the housing waiting list, with rising numbers of residents in temporary accommodation, private rents that many working people are struggling to simply afford, and at the same time, Portsmouth is one of the most densely populated cities in the UK, with very limited land left to build on. We've had some great comments in from our followers and our audience. So we've had one from Laura about questioning about the lack of wheelchair accessible properties, and about the small number of those that are even on the estates that are being built on. She mentions there that the estate she lives on built 6 houses suitable for wheelchair users to move straight into, but there needs to be more of this sort of inclusive building. Emma talks about sheltered accommodation that's available for those who rent, who wish to stay living in the same community, but that can also provide additional support for the elderly care, and too much taxpayers' money being spent on private companies for caregivers and care homes, and therefore our elderly deserve much better. Jimbo talked about student accommodation. Not a surprise that that's a frequent issue mentioned. And at what point does it become too much? Portsmouth, he mentions, as far as he understands, is second only to London in density, which indeed we did mention. And Jeffrey talks about the lack of affordable homes as well for young people. Ridiculous that adult children still living at home, even though they've got full-time jobs, and starting a family is almost impossible. So how do you solve a housing crisis in a city that physically can't expand? It's an island, by the way, just in case anybody missed, Portsmouth being the country's only island city. So today we are joined with the man responsible for housing at Portsmouth City Council, the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness, Cllr Darren Sanders. We'll be asking what the council is doing to tackle homelessness, whether enough homes are actually being built, and why some properties are sitting empty, and what the national government can do to make things change. Good evening and welcome, Darren.
Good evening, Simon and Ian.
Thank you very much for joining us. So,
not at all.
What are the responsibilities of the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness, and what attracted you to it?
Oh, blimey. I think the responsibilities cover basically 3 areas. I mean, there's lots of them. It's 3 areas. The first is council housing. So I oversee, we've got Portsmouth 17,000 or so council homes. Now, unlike other people, these aren't just in Portsmouth, but they're on large estates like Lee Park, which is in the Havant Council area. And we've got 150, couple of hundred we bought from a housing association called Cllr a couple of years ago in Gosport, Frome and Winchester. So it's a pretty broad area. My job is basically that of a landlord, except I don't go in and repair a boiler. So I sort of set the rents, set the service charges, and agree the budget for repairs and large redevelopment schemes. And then I also decide policies on everything from antisocial behaviour to pets. The next bit is that I oversee the team that enforces housing standards in the private rented sector. So the people who go in when a tenant is worried about the state of their property. I also agree things like space standards for HMOs, and have made sure that all HMOs in the city have been licensed twice. The third bit is the other bit, which is tackling homelessness. Now, I'm sure we'll discuss this a bit more as we go along. But my job is to oversee our policies on this, working alongside a homelessness partnership board, which includes lots of people who, the voluntary sector, the council, the police, people who are interested in making sure that homeless people can lead the sort of lives they should lead and they want to lead. And they work with me on devising the policies on how we handle what governments call priority homeless. That's people who've been kicked out by their landlord, for instance. And those it calls non-priority homeless, or those sleeping on the streets that you and I will probably know about. And I also oversee the team trying to move people on the housing register and those trying to stop homelessness in the first place. So that's pretty much it. There's a bit more, but that's pretty much it. So you asked why I did it. Well, I grew up in council homes in Lamport, Fratton and Somerstown, so I knew exactly what it was like to live in a council home, both good and bad. And so when the job came up, I thought it was just a natural fit for my experiences and my abilities.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. So,
Thank you.
thank you, Darren. A man with many hats to wear. So let's start with council housing. Is it still really a thing in 2026? I mean, or I thought Maggie had sold it all off. Is it still, something that's growing? Or the demand is it still a thing?
Well, in most of the country, and you'd be dead right. There's no council housing, and they all flogged it off. Conservative councils flogged it off. Labour councils flogged it off. Liberal Democrat councils flogged it off. But in Portsmouth, no party ever did. And I think that's one of the best things that ever happened. I think there's been a political consensus over the decades that Portsmouth's council housing is a good thing. And actually, council housing is a good thing. And that's actually something that not all councils agree with. So it is definitely still a thing.
And I guess when we think about that, you mentioned the figure of 17,000 homes. How many people, and waiting lists is a thing. So how many people are currently on the waiting list, and if how does one get on it, and how long might one have to wait before a council house became available?
Okay, well, I'm hopefully I'll answer all of those in one go.
Yeah,
The waiting list itself varies from day to day, but at the end of last year, it was around about 2,800 people. But that covers not only the people who are living in Portsmouth, but the people who are living in Havant as well.
yeah.
And so the figure covers both of those areas. So it's pretty reasonable to say it's just under 2,000 people in Portsmouth and just around about 900 people or so in Havant. That list covers a whole raft of people, but basically they come to people who are currently renting privately who want a council home, and council tenants who want a different council home.
Mm.
How long they wait? Well, that depends upon a range of things. I changed the allocations policy because in my mind, people were just waiting far too long. Some people waiting years for a place. I wanted to try and speed that up. So late 2024, I changed it so that we have 4 bands, which is exceptional, urgent, significant, and recognised. And the waiting lists across all of them are going down. The number of people, particularly in the urgent band, has gone down by 100 in the last 12 months, for instance. But there are many, many factors that depend upon how long people wait. We've got various priorities within there. So one of them is how long you've lived in the city, whether you were born in the city. Another one is whether you're a veteran or not. Also, what happens is certainly people who come to me looking for a home want to live in places where council housing is scarce. And we don't
Yeah.
want, and try and tell the team, don't move anybody to a place they don't want to go. Doesn't always work, but that's my general starting point. And so that makes the wait a bit longer. If you want to live in, say, Southsea, there are fewer council homes. If, say, for instance, you want to live in Paulsgrove or Somerstown or Lee Park.
Yeah.
Some of the issues, Simon, you identified at the start are also very true. We simply don't have the family homes many people need. We don't have enough homes for people in wheelchairs, and that's a real issue. I'd move everybody who comes to me, basically, but I can't. But we have speeded the movement of people around up a bit in the last year. We're moving 20% more people than happened a year ago. And that's especially true, as I said, of those people in the urgent band, veterans, and are homeless as well. And that's actually cutting the register. Not by very much, but it's cutting the register. But the truth is, a one-day wait is too long. I'd love to be able to remove it, but it's really difficult. And you highlighted some of the reasons why earlier.
I guess some of the perceptions, and we like to talk about myths when we tackle these issues, is that somebody who is perhaps in that 4th band of recognised, will their kind of home ever come to pass, or will they sit at the kind of bottom of the pile, only ever to be taken over by people with more pride of them in the queue?
I didn't quite hear the last bit of that question, but I think it was like, are they ever going to get a home? And the answer is some of them will.
Yeah.
Both of the things you said are true. It depends upon the person. It depends upon the circumstances. But that's why we try to rearrange those bands to try and be more realistic with people, because it's important. I regularly tell the so-called the housing needs advice and support team to be straight with people. And sometimes that leads to people getting upset because they're being told, look, it's going to be very difficult for you to find a place and it might be quicker for you to rent privately. And people don't like that, and I get that. But what I don't want is people to be told a fancy story in the hope of being nice, because I don't think that's fair.
No, and I think, often it's sometimes it's politically expedient to give people false hope than tell them the reality. So no, that seems a perfectly sensible approach to take, which is what we love on this podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I've always tell people if they can, then they should. And the key thing is to give it a go. And I try and be straight with people around who come to me around the issues that we face. And one of them is actually where you want to go. There are people who just don't want to go to certain parts of the city, and that may be where there are homes. But what I don't want to do is to say, well, you've got to go there, when they clearly don't. And many of them have got very, very good reasons for it. And that's why it's important just to be straight with people.
Brilliant. Thank you, Darren. Simon.
So private developers seem to kind of favour either really large kind of family homes or, quite expensive kind of homes, or obviously there's quite a high prevalence of student accommodation constructions, a lot of it high rise and especially concentrated in certain parts of the city. What are these really the homes that people actually need in the city? Is it that the homes that are being built are the wrong ones, do you think? Is that kind of part of the problem?
Well, I mean, I think, I'd say that's very different to what I normally hear, and that's, the council's building student flats.
Well, to be fair, that's the kind of the prevalence in the conversation, isn't it? Is why do the council keep building all these student flats? So
yeah. I mean, the council doesn't build student flats. The council's planning team and planning committee may approve student flats, and that's definitely true. But the council doesn't build them.
Yeah.
Indeed, a few years ago, when we were trying to get our rough sleepers out of the hotels, we actually bought student blocks so we could house our homeless. I've asked the planning team to ask developers who say, oh, look, we can't fill the student blocks in town. Well, why don't you put the homeless in? I've been told to get lost. But because developers don't want to do that, even though they say they can't fill it. And can you change it, please? So, the council's not building student flats. It's in any case, buying them. But that flippancy actually marks the real issue, which you're actually saying. And the truth is that it's sort of both right. The answer is sort of. We definitely need more family homes in the city. That's very true. And so building larger homes is something that's very, very important. Also, we've got 29,000 students in the city. So there's a lot of students to accommodate. So there is certainly a market for both of those things, definitely. I mean, the issues around students, sadly, I can't deal with. What I could wish is the council could build much, much more, but we've had real problems over the last few years doing that, and that's made it hard to do so.
So, and that's an interesting point. So, what's stopping the council building more of the homes that people need?
I mean, the first is space. The council has the same problem that private developers have. It's just where do you go? And that's one of the reasons why I think the government's housing target for Portsmouth is stupid, because there is simply just not the room unless we start building on Milton Common or Southsea Common or Farlington playing fields. And none of us want to do that. But also, the council has been caught through things like the Liz Truss, high interest rates, Labour's rise in employers' national insurance, all that stuff has made it harder for councils to deliver viable schemes. I mean, last week, I was able to announce lift-off for the new Summers Orchard project in Somerstown, new council housing in Somerstown. But that's taken a while, and that's because it's been trying to make sure the scheme's viable. And only now, with Labour's changes to grants for social housing, which have been very good, and also the market's changing, that we're able to announce liftoff. That's why, instead of building council homes, when we came back in 2000, when Liberal Democrats came back in 2018, we decided to allocate nearly £100 million to buy them back, the homes that were sold under right to buy. And we bought around about 700, I think it is. May have got that figure wrong, but it's about 700. And that's 700 former council homes back under council control, because I know that people want homes Portsmouth people can afford.
Okay. Oh, sorry, next one, Ian.
Yeah. So again, something that comes up in these discussions is about the cost and the amount of temporary accommodation that's needed. As we move towards the sort of homelessness issues, how big a problem is it, and what is the council doing to kind of deal with it?
Well, I mean, Ian, the glib answer is the problem's too big because there's one person who needs it. And that's a glib answer. It's also true. It is definitely a big issue. It's not as big as across other parts of the country, but it's definitely big. And it's certainly big for the people who are affected by it. I mean, as of a month ago, there are 519 households in temporary accommodation. 350 of those are families. Now, that's less than a quarter of the figure in Brighton, but more than in Southampton. If you're in London, it is bankrupting councils across London, the numbers in there, and they're huge numbers, and we're nowhere near those levels, but it's still significant. And when we had a particular problem late last year, about 18 months ago, we decided to get the council to borrow more than £30 million to buy 200 homes to deal with the crisis, because we knew we had to deal with the problem pretty quickly. But that was us facing a problem that many other councils have faced 2-3 years previously. And many of them just didn't know how to handle it. But we said, okay, well, we've got a model that allows us to buy former council homes. So let's buy it to house our homeless. And more than half have been bought already, or in the pipeline of being bought already. But it means we've got people out of privately rented accommodation, B&B, and into council owned accommodation, which we think people would trust more. Also, what we found is that we weren't preventing enough people becoming homeless in the first place. So I said, let's try and see if we can change it. And that there's been real differences then. It was about a quarter 2 years ago. It's now 2/5 now. Because, I mean, if we stop people becoming homeless, then we won't need temporary accommodation. But the key thing is that temporary accommodation is not bankrupting Portsmouth as it is across London and across other parts of the country. And that's really, really, really important.
Because I think the perception is often that temporary accommodation, is one of those things where the people who own the B&Bs or the cheap hotels are able to kind of effectively gouge the council and get you to pay whatever they want. Is that a fair assumption, or is it something that you've now got a list of people that you work with who are?
Oh no, we've got a list of people that we work with. The reason I was scrunching up around the use of the word gouging is that I agree with you, but not for the reasons that you may think. One of the problems we've got is that the level of subsidy that councils get, particularly for single homeless, is linked to what's called the local housing allowance, being crude, it's housing benefit, but the local housing allowance level in 2011.
Right.
So that's 15 years. And that means that when it was going when the budget gap, the so-called overspend in the jargon, was reaching about £6 million, a lot of that was that for every pound the council got in subsidy to house a homeless person, the council was spending a fiver. That's just ridiculous. So I think the gouging side of it is fair, but not for anything I think the council does. That's just down to that's just governments not being brave enough to provide councils with the money they need by increasing the subsidy.
I think we're seeing a theme here.
Yeah,
Simon.
You might be.
Yeah. So what are the causes of that homelessness that then turns into that is driving that need for temporary accommodation? What's causing that?
Have you got all night? I mean, there are so many causes. Every person's got their own story and why they're homeless. And particularly when we took over and we had a what's called a rough sleeping strategy. One of the things we wanted to do was treat everybody as individuals, treat everybody as human. So not everybody has the same story. Some people have been kicked out by their landlords. Some people have been kicked out by their friends and family. I remember talking to a rough sleeper in the doorway in Boots in Commercial Row, and all he said was, "Well, it's better than Hellmand." So everyone has their own story, and that's why we've tried to treat people as individuals.
Yeah.
But the stats say that the three main causes of homelessness are either people being kicked out by their landlord, people being kicked out by their friends and family, the so-called sofa surfers, and survivors of domestic abuse. Now, there are many others who are in various other categories, but those tend to be the top three. And we're doing a range of things to try and stop it. As I said, we're preventing more homelessness. That's good. We're providing more homes for people who need a place to stay. We've also we've got a team working with private landlords to place those that can start there in that sort of accommodation. But I think also what we've done is we've recognised not everybody who sleeps on the streets wants help, and our outreach team tries to help them in. Some do want accommodation, some don't. And we know some in the accommodation we have for homeless people ruin it, and therefore they've got to go because we don't want them to ruin other people's lives, and it's tough. But that comes from treating people as individuals and humans, not sort of numbers on paper. And it's a range of things that we're trying to do. But the main thing we've got to do is to try and prevent homelessness. And government is finally recognising that through its recent homelessness strategy, and that's good news.
Okay, that's great. Can I just quickly? We've got an interesting comment from one of the viewers, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
kind of winds back to rewind to one of the things actually just we were just talking about there. Michelle was asking about council buybacks. We were mentioning those just now. Why the rents for those are higher? What's the reasoning for that? Is there a reason for that?
So that's fine. Thanks for that, Michelle. You're not the first person who said that to me. There are two types of rent. There's what's called social rent, and there's what's called affordable rent. And to make the buybacks stack up, in other words, to make sure we've got the money, we can make the money back on the borrowing. And bear in mind, the extra money goes into the housing revenue account, which means we could spend more money on things like repairs and doing up people's homes and making people's homes safe. There's two levels. There's what's called a social rent, which is a certain percentage of the market, and then there's an affordable rent. Now, I cap all rents at the local housing allowance level, which is, again, being crude, is the level of housing benefit. So the idea behind that is to make sure that everybody can afford a property that they go into. Not everybody does, but I think that's an important thing. So that's the difference between the two. It means we've been able to turn those properties into council homes, and it is difficult because you may have a situation where different people in the same block pay slightly different amounts of rent. But the thing there is that those properties were previously right to buy; they were previously privately owned, and so people were paying different amounts anyway. But I thought that was a reasonable compromise to try and make sure we can get more council homes in the city.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the question, Michelle.
But thanks for that, Michelle.
So, and another popular topic, and sometimes lively on social media, shall I mention Knight and Lee? No, I won't mention Knight and Lee. So what is the council doing about abandoned or empty buildings and potentially turning them into homes that people can live in?
Okay, well, you might not mention Knight and Lee, but I will, sooner or later. So there's two types of such property. There's three types of properties that get people going. The first is the council's own housing. Sometimes people move out, and when I came in, it took ages to turn around what's called a void property. But under us, we've cut that time in half, and that means people can move in quicker. So that's the first type of empty home people see. The second is private homes that are empty. I think there are too many of them. So last year I overhauled what's called the empty homes strategy. And this was despite the fact that in Portsmouth we've got fewer empty homes than you might think. We've got about 950 empty homes.
Yeah.
And over a 5-year period, so between 2018 and 2023, the number of empty homes in the rest of the country went up by nearly a quarter. And in Portsmouth, they went up by 1.2%. So the numbers are not going up by as much, and 7 out of 10 are empty for less than 2 years, which triggers some sort of legal mechanism that exists. But it's still 950 too many. And because
Yeah.
we're so densely populated, people just notice them more because they want to know, why is that house empty when we've got people on the waiting list? Fair point.
Yeah.
So the strategy looks at trying to help owners bringing homes back into use. Won't work all the time. I had one woman who was penalised for her home being empty when in fact she just wasn't able to sell it.
Yeah.
And not least the council wouldn't buy it.
Right.
So she wasn't punished because she'd done everything she could to try and bring the home back into use. We want to try and make sure everybody's like her. Then we want to try and tackle the problems that come from empty homes. So things like pests that get in, or the overgrown garden at the back, all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. The third point is try and make sure all parts of the council and outside bodies work together to deliver that, so everybody knows it's important. And then the final thing is to intervene as soon as it's known that property is empty, so work can get started in the same way it gets started with council homes. So that's the empty homes, but that's a relatively small amount. It won't solve everything, we know that, but it's at least a start. And then the third bit is not just the lovely Knight and Lee, but also things like the old cinema on Fratton Road.
Mm.
You know, these sites these sites got planning permission. I think I was on the committee that approved Knight and Lee, approved both sites, I think. But years later, they're still empty. Well, that's mad. And people get angry. And people in Southsea get angry because they think it ruins Palmerston Road. And people on Fratton Road get angry because they think it ruins Fratton Road. And there's plenty more like that. One of the problems the council's had in terms of intervening is that the compulsory purchase powers that have existed have meant that it's been very, there's something called hope value. So if the council wanted to buy it, they have to take into account how much a developer hopes it'll go for. And that, frankly, is just name your price time. Because any developer with any sense will just name a price. The government's changed that recently in line with Labour's manifesto commitments at the election to deal with fair compensation. I've not seen the details of that, but I hope it really does make it easier for councils to purchase those sorts of sites, because they're eyesore sites. And as I said, the really sad thing is, like so many sites in the city, they've got planning permissions, just nobody's done anything with them. And the council tends to get blamed for it. They've got to try and stop that happening.
Without inviting you to speculate, there's a lot of talk sometimes about land banking, because it almost feels like the way the property market has continued to grow, you know, it's why people own buy-to-let properties, and I guess these developers have their planning permission, and then, you know, just sit there and effectively wait for that investment to accumulate to as you say, to be able to sell it off to the highest bidder, possibly the council.
Yeah, I mean, I hear all sorts of stuff. So, excuse me, I won't speculate. I think
No.
what's fair is that, sorry guys, probably what all of the above is true.
Yeah.
But also there are plenty of developers who face the same problems we do as a council in terms of, you know, making things stack up with the increase in costs. So there's a range of reasons, but I would regard Knight and Lee and the old cinema on Fratton Road as land banking, definitely. Whether it's intentional or not, I don't know. But they got planning permission and then they're still empty. I mean, it's completely mad, utterly mad.
Yeah. Simon.
Okay, can I, Darren, do you mind if I share another comment? Because my apologies.
I don't mind. It's your show, so I don't mind.
Has got people involved more than probably most of our other episodes, so it's really nice to see it. So, Natalie talks about being in temporary accommodation for over a year with 2 children, one of which having autism, and she has lupus. Why does it take so long? Why? And you took the buying back properties. Are you looking at bigger properties for people with those sorts of needs?
Natalie, I think the first thing to do is if you email me with your specific worries, I can happily raise that with the team. That's no trouble. Guys, I hope you don't mind. I don't want to speculate on Natalie's circumstances without knowing a bit
Thank
more.
you. That would be
But that doesn't mean I don't want to.
right. Yeah.
That makes me sound like I'm not taking what she's saying seriously. There are definitely people who are in temporary accommodation for too long. But then again, for me, being in temporary accommodation for 1 day is too long. So there are definitely people who are in temporary accommodation for too long. That's why we're trying our best to see if we can get them into council homes. As I said before, there's a whole raft of reasons why people are there. And every case is difficult and every case is unique. So I won't speculate, but what we're trying to do is hopefully by continue to buy and build more council homes, then hopefully we can try and remove this problem. But it is very difficult, especially if you've got a child with autism, especially if you've got a child who's neurodivergent.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. But Natalie, please email me, madam.
Is that and I'll share it with Natalie in a second if that's all right. Is that
Please.
the PCC email?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Please. I mean, she may not get the answer she wants, but I will definitely raise it with the team. No trouble.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan. Really appreciate that.
Right.
So
thank you, Natalie.
So January last year, the council was given a C3 rating, which is there are 4 ratings which I'm sure you know, but just so that our viewers and listeners understand, there are 4 ratings, C3 being obviously the third, for its social housing. It's given that rating by the regulator. What's being done to kind of turn that around?
Yeah, the picture you paint is a bit more nuanced than that, actually. So what happened was the government introduced a whole raft of new standards for social housing providers, and that was mainly as a result of the horror at Grenfell. I insisted the council referred itself to the regulator because it felt clear that the council may not be meeting all of them, and these were new standards. So the regulator came back. The regulator said yes. Its view was a bit more, as I said, nuanced than what you said, Simon. It felt the council was on the borderline of the C2 and the C3 category, but issues mainly linked to data systems made it put the council in the C3 category. So since then, council's been working with the regulator on the various areas of concern it raised, and I'm going to be seeing them at the end of the month, so I'll have a rough idea of where they are. But as far as I know, it seems content with the progress that's being made. And bear in mind, they raised a series of concerns with us, but also the work we did in what's called the self-referral, the things referred to the social housing regulator, highlighted issues that the housing team wanted to change, but the regulator didn't think were areas of concern. So all of that work is being done, whether it was a regulator area of concern or not.
Yeah.
I think that the issues weren't spotted earlier because they were linked to regulations that really weren't in place. I mean, we've got tenant satisfaction. The team, Portsmouth Housing's got tenant satisfaction ratings 10 to 15 points higher than local housing associations across the board. So, you think it might be working. But certainly the team and the regulator, from what I see, is appearing to work well. Progress is being made. I think some people have talked about inspections. I've got no idea when we might or might not be inspected. But I've told the regulator it's a bit silly to inspect an authority that might not be here in 2 years. But that's fallen on deaf ears so far.
Thank you very much. That was interesting to kind of know as you say, the nuance and the details of that, because it's quite
and it's just easy because it's very difficult. I mean, it's the stuff that I've talked about previously, but not in such a wide forum as this. But it is a bit more nuanced than that, and it's like all inspections. You get one particular grade, and then everybody thinks that's right, and the context and the discussions tend not to be made public, and that's a shame, really, in this context when it was made very clear to us that we were on the borderline of a couple of categories.
Thank you.
So it's quite a big it's quite a big portfolio you cover there, Darren.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
what is the biggest thing that's currently on your virtual whiteboard or to-do list at the moment?
Well, it's a thing that's something which has actually come off my whiteboard, which is the lift off for the Summers Orchard projects, the former Leamington Horatia houses in Somerstown. That's 175 council homes, 59 family homes, like people have been talking about, 26 wheelchair homes. I know Laura was asking about the start you said at the start of your show.
Yeah.
Um, but the key thing is that it's a plan that's been put together by local people, not by
Mm.
politicians and not by civil servants, not by London. I mean, when I was growing up in Somerstown, we had a whole raft of schemes and plans by people who never really ever wanted to live there, but just wanted to tell everybody who lived there how they should live their lives and what sort of buildings they should be in. So you can tell the reaction of that. I remember
Oh, yeah.
There's one scheme when we were living in St Paul's. It was about my mum's block in St Paul's Square. And one of the schemes was to have knock down the half of the block that my mum wasn't living in, because it was important to have a better view of Astley Street. Now, if you've ever been to Astley Street, the people in Astley Street are lovely, but a world-class view of Astley Street will not feature highly in redesigning an area. But that was done by people who never lived there. What we did was we said, okay, to local people, what do you want? And then what we have is their vision, not mine. It's their vision. And that's the important thing, because I think too many people have felt not in control of the communities around them and feel that things are being done to them and not with them. And it was very clear that when this scheme came up, I didn't want that to happen because I knew they'd been failed so often.
Mm.
And so to have this and finally to be able to announce the first block, and hopefully with the devolution deal that Portsmouth and its partners have secured for Hampshire and the new strategic partnership with Homes England, we'll be able to finish the deal, because it's not 175 homes, it's over 500 homes, including homes to try and attract people to Somerstown, which I know is a part of the
Mm.
city that some people have misconceptions about. Place people don't want to go to in several cases. And I want to try and make sure it's a scheme that will attract people to Somerstown and actually build more homes Portsmouth people can afford. So I'm proud of that.
It's an interesting point there, Darren, because obviously you've gone for Summers Orchard as the name of it. And again, it's an area of the city I don't know well. You kind of grew up there, but I think you will acknowledge that Somerstown is probably one of those areas of Portsmouth that does have a certain stigma around it. There's a perception of it from people that don't live there. Um, Obviously this development has got an element of newness, and did you think about a rebranding exercise to perhaps lose some of that connection with the past, or was it important still to recognise those roots?
Well, I think the people who live in the area, I mean, some recognise that there have been problems. There always have been. But I think the reputation that it's got. I mean, I've had people who've come to me, and I always say to people, where do you want to live in the city, or where don't you want to live in the city, when they want to move? And Somerstown features very highly on the list of places where people don't want to go to.
Hmm.
And even when I say I've lived there, some change their tune, some don't. What I wanted to do was to make sure that no area felt left behind. And that way was to put local people in charge, because they're very proud of their area.
Yeah.
Many of them don't see what outsiders perceive. I'm certainly proud to have lived there for a decade. Mum lived there for considerably longer. So I'm happy with the name. I've got no problems with that. I think it's very easy to run away from your past.
Hmm.
And I don't do that, because at the risk of sounding trite, your past is a very good guide your experiences in the past help shape how you think in future. And I don't want to run away from the name. I want to try and make the place better so it becomes a place people go to rather than don't want to go to.
So I always hate to pin a politician down on timelines. So when will the first block be up, and B, the whole project be finished?
Well, I can give you a sort of answer to the first question. The current plan is to start work next year, with a view to the first block being ready by 2030. One of the reasons it's so long is it's got to go through something called the Building Safety Regulator, and they've got to check everything. And in fact, the changes in building safety regulations is one of the reasons why this has taken so long. But that's just an utter pain. There's one safety certificate in a block. I won't mention the block, but I know the block's name. That took 81 weeks to get through the Building Safety Regulator.
Wow.
I mean, there are jail sentences shorter than that. And, that's a real problem. There's others that have taken over a year to get through. So the dates we're giving, I think, were on site 2027, completion early 2030. I'll argue for it to be done much, much faster than that. As for the rest, I don't know. I think that the new stuff we've secured for the new Hampshire and Isle of Wight Combined Authority gives us a real chance to get it going. And I think we all believe that once work actually starts on site, people will see that we're serious, and people will see, and developers will be attracted to the site and will be able to get it up quicker. But I can't give you a date for the other two blocks. I'm sorry, Ian. I can't.
No. And to be fair, it's one of those things, Darren, where we try and kind of take people behind the curtain a little bit, because obviously, I'm trying to remember when Leamington and Horatio were taken down. It was obviously post Grenfell.
2019, I think it was.
Yeah. So, and I guess it's that trying to give people an insight as to, 11 years between them being taken down and the first blocks going up. There's always a perception, isn't there, that in the commercial world, nothing would take 11 years. And it feels sometimes the challenge in the kind of statutory council world, government world, is that everything takes longer than it should.
Well, that's partly true. But you mentioned Knight and Lee. I mentioned the old cinema on Fratton Road. I could talk to you about the Quick Save on Stubbington Avenue. It's been empty for years. They're all private properties, and they've been empty for years. And I think that comes back to, so since the blocks came down, we've had the pandemic, which created real issues. We've had the stupidity of the Liz Truss budget, which just blew everything away. And then we've had the stupidity of the employer national insurance rises being linked to councils and the contractors who work for them, and that's another issue that affects viability. What I never wanted to do was to just do a scheme and then do a scheme without the money being in place.
Yeah,
because I've seen too many white elephants. Thank you, and Somerstown doesn't deserve a white elephant, and I think we've now got the first step towards it not being a white elephant, and that's really, really great.
Brilliant.
Okay,
Simon.
Good news. So feeding off of yet another comment. John talks about one of the problems, and we talked about it quite extensively earlier on, was about Thatcher selling off all the council housing. And he talks about to people that could never afford to maintain them, and that's obviously depleted the council stock. But if you had this Prime Minister's ear, what one thing would you ask Keir? I mean, I don't know if we need to be as precious with only one thing. You might have more than one thing, to be fair. If you had Keir's ear, what would you ask him to do or change that would make it easier for you to help the housing situation in Portsmouth?
Oh, blimey. If I had his ear, have a vision for what Britain looks like, go, to be honest, that sort of thing, because I think that his inability to articulate a vision is damaging this country. I have no idea what this government stands for. And I think if you need the change that Britain requires, you need someone with a vision rather than an engineer or a plumber. So I would say go, being honest. It's the first thing I'd say. As far as housing is concerned, I'd tell him to raise the local housing allowance. Because the bits I can't control the wider housing market in the city. I would love to. I can't control the level of private rents, which are far too high for too many people in this city. And I really believe it's one of the reasons why people in this city use food banks, because there's not enough money at the end of the week, and that's partly because of the high levels of private rents in the city. I may be wrong. I'm sure I'm going to have landlords telling me tomorrow that I'm talking out of something, but I really do believe that's right. I mean, I can't believe that every chancellor except Jeremy Hunt has frozen it for like 15, 16, 17 years. But doing so has real trouble for us in the city. For the council, it means we can't get all the income we could have. Bear in mind, I cap rents at the local housing allowance level, which is currently frozen. If the local housing allowance rose, we'd be able to spend more money on repairs, building homes, all that sort of stuff. As I said, I really believe that it prices low-paid people out of the city's rental market. We had a paper on poverty in the city last week, and there were like 30,000 people on universal credit in the city, and a third of them were in work. A third of council tenants work and are on benefits. So anything that helps low-paid people into the city's rental market is a good thing. And it means people who could get a home now are on the waiting list, be more likely to get a home. And that's before we get to the stuff around local housing allowance levels, as I said, for single people in temporary accommodation. Raise the local housing. If it's just one thing, it's raise the local housing allowance and give councils and people some hope.
Okay, fantastic.
Got a question for you, Darren, that wasn't on the original list, but as we've worked through it, it's kind of occurred to me. And
Sure.
I hate to mention local government reorganisation and devolution.
It was going so well, Ian.
We've got to, haven't we? So if you're sat here in 2, 3, 5, 10, 12 years' time, when all of that's finally happened, Gosport, Fareham, Waterlooville, Havant, Hayling Island, does that give you more opportunities, those great tracts of arable land, to meet the housing target, or does that just make your job inexorably more complex?
Can I separate out those two things?
Of course you
Ian?
can.
Is that all right? I mean, firstly, local government reorganisation is a complete abomination for Portsmouth. We've recently approved a budget that had a funding gap of £3 million. We know on day one of the new authority, unless Hampshire achieves a miracle, that's going to be £67 million. And that's a nightmare for this city. There are real benefits for Havant, Gosport and Fareham because they can go through what in the jargon they call unitarisation, which is what we did in 1997. It's the best thing we did. But for Portsmouth, it's really, really, really damaging. And I don't know how widely damaging it will be. So that's why we believe the best thing to do is for the government to keep their hands off us. One of the key things for local government reorganisation is you're right, it's around housing land. And the difficulty is that unless it only really works if places that feel part of Portsmouth, so places like Clanfield, Rowlands Castle, Horndean, that feel part of Portsmouth, that are currently in East Hants District Council, come in with any council we're in. And that means the figures I've seen means it goes up from 33% of our potential land for housing to 40% of our potential land for housing. Yeah. The one thing you don't read from that is 100% of our land for housing. So it increases the opportunities, but it still means that there's not enough land. I don't think any of us want to build on Southsea Common, want to build on, Queen Elizabeth Country Park, if wherever they come in, Milton Common or Farlington Plainfields. I mean, none of us want to do that. But you're right, it does. If our plan B comes to fruition, which is to include those areas, then that's something that would definitely help. But as far as the overall picture is concerned, as far as housing is concerned, I really don't know. I don't know whether the housing revenue account that we have in all 4 councils would benefit or not. I've no idea. All I know is it would be damaging to the council overall, and that's why it's important for government to keep its hands off Portsmouth.
Yeah, and I guess looking at through that lens, it's that it doesn't matter what opportunities extra land might present, if you haven't got 2 brass farthings to rub together because of the big hole in the budget that comes with it,
Yeah.
you can't exploit those opportunities.
No, it's very difficult. I mean, after that, you go and you're begging bowl to government, and Hampshire's tried going for a begging bowl for 2 years and has been told to get lost. So it's very difficult. It's really difficult, and I just find it so sad, and it's such a waste, because I think Labour could have done so much to actually make local government more secure. Things like fixing council tax, fixing social care, devolution, which, although I hate mayors, I think is a good idea. Getting powers out of London to more local areas. There's some really good stuff, and they've all ruined it by getting councils across the country of whatever political party wasting their time on something like this.
No, I think it's not something I don't think the hosts of this podcast would particularly disagree with. I guess as we get towards the end of our list, Darren, if we haven't got any more questions from the audience.
Well, there was a quick and probably a quick and easy one.
Okay.
Would you want to see the government end the right to buy council houses?
For Portsmouth, yes, because of the nature of the housing market in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it will necessarily. I don't think necessarily should be any for other councils, but I think the combination of things that we've got in this city means that we have to have as many homes people can afford as possible. I certainly know of people who've taken up the right to buy, and the council team that deals with right to buy is very good in terms of just telling people, look, can you really afford this? And they say yes, and then they come back later and go, well, I can't afford the mortgage. And one of the reasons that we're able to buy back so many right to buy homes is because people think, okay, this doesn't work for us any longer. I think giving councils the freedom to do that based on a realistic assessment of the housing market, I think that would be good. Personally, for Portsmouth, I would, but I wouldn't want to speak for anywhere else because I think it could still work. But that's purely because of the nature of the housing market in the city. Rents are too high, people can't afford it, and people want homes they can afford.
Perfect.
Is that kind of part of the problem, though? And might be the government, the temptation of governments to have one-size-fits-all solutions?
Yes, totally. And I think that comes back to reorganisation, which is it's a one-size-fits-all policy, and that's a real shame. And I think the trouble is that if central government has not given local councils, and really, this isn't a party political point, it's true of all councils, that if haven't given local councils enough freedom over the years to actually deliver on the decisions that people want. I think if you talk to a Labour, Conservative, Independent, Green, Reform, whatever councillor, they tell you the one thing they'd be most interested in is actually getting power for their local areas so they can do the work for their local areas. And I think government is too scared of letting go. I think reorganisation is just the latest iteration of that stupidity.
Brilliant. So, Darren, thank you. A massive topic that you've covered supremely well. I think we better, again, we just end on an element of hope. Portsmouth has got at least 2 more years. What's your biggest hope for the next couple of years for Portsmouth, in either housing or the wider city as a whole?
My biggest hope is that we're not involved in reorganisation at all, because it means we'll carry on for more than 2 years. But if not, and if we're forced into merger, then I hope that many of the good ways and good practice that the council uses, I mean, we're nationally recognised for our help on veterans, for instance, goes into the new authority, and so to give it the best chance of surviving against this huge debt, deficit that is coming from Hampshire, and the hope that we don't wind up being like Manchester United after the Glazers took over.
And a deep football reference, which obviously Simon will be nodding along to. He hasn't got a clue.
Yeah, I'm gonna
So-
nod, but I've got no idea.
Just going to nod at that,
Yeah.
at that point. No, thank you ever so much, Darren. So you've
No
been
worries.
listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guest this evening has been Councillor Darren Sanders. Thank you, Darren.
No worries.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. Our next show will be on Wednesday at 6:27, where we'll take our reaction to PMQs. See you next time. Remember, the deadline to register to vote in May's local elections is 11:59 p.m. on Monday the 20th of April. Use the QR code on screen to take you to the Electoral Commission's website, where there are further details about registering to vote, as well as information where you can confirm where you would need to vote if you're voting in person on the day. Other deadlines apply to register for postal or proxy voting. Don't forget, if you're voting in person on May the 7th, you'll need to take photo ID to be able to vote. If you're not sure what photo ID counts, scan the QR code on screen or go to the Electoral Commission's website, where there are further details, including information about how to apply for a free voter authority certificate, which you will be able to use to vote in person on the day. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.